The flickering light illuminated a pair of hands bound behind her back by shiny metal cuffs. They belonged to a black woman in her 50s, her long fingers now deeply marked with handcuff imprints. She stood upright beside a sleek black Lexus ES 350 sedan that had been pulled to the side of the road, a stark contrast between the luxury of the car and the plight of its owner. Her shirt was slightly disheveled, one side of her collar pulled askew, a sign of a brief but violent struggle. Under the yellow streetlights and flashing police lights, her face was not fully visible, but her jaw was slightly clenched with restraint, her eyes staring straight ahead, not with disintegrating fear, but with an ominous stillness, a suppressed anger. Two uniformed figures stood nearby. Officer Dale Harding, a stout, middle-aged man with a red face and a belly that bulged under his bulletproof vest, leaned against the patrol car door with his arms crossed. His gaze on the handcuffed woman was undisguised with gloating contempt. "See, I told you not to be a jerk," Harding said, breaking the heavy silence, his voice full of the smugness of someone who had just won. "Now stand still, lady driver." Officer Kevin Riley, a younger man with a buzz cut, let out a chuckle. He was circling the Lexus, peering into each window, searching for something inside. "Let's see if there's anything interesting in this car. Probably full of filth." The handcuffed woman did not immediately respond to the taunts. She took a deep breath. The cool, damp air of the autumn afternoon filled her lungs, carrying with it the smell of damp leaves and city smog. Then she spoke, her voice low and even, surprisingly without the slightest tremor, only a hidden steeliness. "Your actions are illegal. You have no legitimate reason to stop my car, search my car, and even less the right to handcuff me like this." "Illegal?" Harding laughed, the sound unpleasant. He pushed himself off the patrol car and walked toward the woman. "In this neighborhood, on my turf, I am the law. You, resisting the police, driving suspiciously like this, and this car in a working-class neighborhood that's reason enough." He stopped right in front of her, crouching down to look her in the eye, his breath smelling of cheap cigarettes. "Maybe they'll do a drug test too. You guys are known to hide stuff." The way he said "you guys" couldn't have been more racist. Riley, who had stopped scrutinizing the car, moved closer, standing behind Harding, forming a menacing pincer movement. "I demand your names and numbers," the woman repeated, her voice remaining calm but growing more insistent. "And I demand a phone call." "Oh, demanding?" Harding sneered. "Who do you think you are to demand numbers here?" He pointed defiantly at his name tag. "Officer Harding, OC 1127. That's Officer Riley, OC 1539. Remember that, so you can tell your slum lawyer." "Calling?" Riley interjected, his voice mocking. "Calling who?" "Calling you to pay the fine." The woman's silence in the face of repeated insults seemed to provoke the two officers. They were not used to a black person, especially a woman, showing no fear in the face of them, especially in a handcuffed situation. Her calmness was a challenge to their authority. None of them, including the woman herself, could have predicted the seismic impact the call would have not just on the two lowly police officers, but on the highest echelons of power in the country. The unjust drama on the empty streets of Oak Creek was only the beginning of a confrontation in which the balance of power was about to dramatically shift. It had started about 15 minutes earlier. A black Lexus ES 350 was cruising down the streets of Oak Creek City, heading east to what many people unkindly call the other side of the tracks. The woman behind the wheel, Colonel Elena Mitchell, was on her way to visit her mother. She had driven hours from the military base in Virginia where she was stationed, and her face was tired. It was a rare day off, and all she wanted was to get to her mother's house and have a warm, home-cooked meal after months away. She took Maple Avenue, a shortcut from her childhood, knowing that the area was more sophisticated than where she grew up. She paid little attention to the police cruiser slowing behind her. She didn't speed, didn't change lanes abruptly, didn't break any traffic laws. But for Officers Dale Harding and Kevin Riley, sitting in that patrol car, the luxury Lexus and the black woman driving it in the area was a violation in itself. "Look at that Lexus," Kevin Riley said, his voice full of suspicion. He had only been patrolling the area for a few months and carried a heavy dose of prejudice. It must be some drug dealer or high class who got lost. People from over there can't afford to buy cars like that legally. Harding, a 20-year veteran of the force whose career had gone nowhere, largely due to his overbearing attitude and inherent prejudice, nodded in agreement. He didn't like patrolling this corner either, This is the kind of place I'd check out. Maybe I'd make a buck. These guys carry a lot of cash. He smirked. Turn on your lights, Kevin. Pull her over. Riley immediately turned on the red and blue lights. The siren sounded once. Elena Mitchell looked in the rearview mirror, startled, seeing the police car right behind her. She sighed, a little annoyed, but still calmly turned on her signal and slowly pulled the car to the side of the road as required. She turned off the engine, rolled down the window halfway, and waited. Harding stepped out of the patrol car, striding toward the driver's window. He didn't say hello or introduce himself, but rapped hard on the glass with his knuckles. Get out of the car, quickly. His voice was rough and commanding. Elena frowned. What's wrong, officer? Did I do something wrong? I said get out. Harding snapped, his hand resting menacingly on the butt of the gun at his hip. Don't ask any more questions. Where are the papers? Elena kept her composure, reaching into her purse on the passenger seat for her wallet. But Harding didn't wait. He suddenly yanked the car door open, startling Elena. Hurry up. What are you taking so long? He glanced inside the car, then looked Elena up and down with crude appraisal. What are you doing in this neighborhood with that car? You don't look like you're from around here. What kind of business are you running? Riley had also stepped out of the patrol car and stood behind Elena's car, blocking her way back, his hand also resting lightly on his weapon. A smirk was evident on his young face. Elena got out of the car, trying to maintain her dignity despite the insult she felt. She opened her purse and took out her driver's license and registration. Here are my papers, officer. Harding snatched the two pieces of paper and glanced at them. He saw the name Elena Mitchell, saw the address listed as a P.O. box in Fort Belvoir, Virginia military address, but he either ignored or didn't care. To him, a black woman driving a luxury car in this neighborhood could only be illegal, and it was his fatal mistake. Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Harding smirked. What were you doing down there? What was the point of driving all the way up here? It couldn't have been just to see Mom, right? I am a soldier, an officer, Elena said clearly, trying to contain the anger that was beginning to boil. I am on official leave to visit my mother. She lives on Oak Street, just a few blocks away. This car is legally my property, purchased with my pay. Now please tell me why you are stopping me. Elena's reference to herself as a soldier and her calm, professional demeanor seemed to irritate Harding and Riley even more. They expected fear and obsequiousness, not this articulate response. Military? Riley sneered. Sounds cool, but military people are criminals too. What if you're transporting contraband for smugglers? This car looks clean, Harding continued, his voice full of slyness. Maybe we should do a thorough search. Maybe there's drugs under the seats or dirty money in the trunk. Elena looked Harding straight in the eye. You don't have a search warrant, and you don't have probable cause to suspect me. You're harassing me just because of the color of my skin and the car I drive. Seeing that he could not sway Elena with innuendos and threats, Harding decided to switch to plan B, blackmail. He signaled Riley to stand back a bit, pretending to observe the surroundings. Then he lowered his voice, leaned toward Elena, trying to appear friendly. Listen, Soldier Mitchell, it seems like there's a bit of a misunderstanding here. We don't want to make a big deal out of it. It's getting dark now and everyone wants to go home. He paused, glancing at her inquisitively. We can flexibly let this incident go. No need to report it, no need to search it. Just be a little reasonable. He paused, waiting for Elena's reaction. When she remained silent, he continued, his voice even quieter. Just a small on-the-spot charge for suspicious driving. Not much. About, $800 in cash. Quick, no fuss. You hand over the money and go your way. Pretend nothing happened. At this point, Elena's eyes were filled with contempt. She looked straight at Harding, her voice cold and hard. Officer, what you're doing is called extortion. It's a serious crime. I won't pay you a penny. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not afraid of your threats. She stood up straighter. Now I'm going to ask you to give me my papers back and let me go. Or if you want to make a report, do it properly. And I repeat, I want your names and badge numbers. The blunt refusal, the calling out of the blackmail, and the repeated demands for names and numbers added fuel to the fire. Harding and Riley felt challenged, humiliated, and perhaps a little afraid that this woman was not as easy to deal with as they had thought. Anger and the urge to abuse rose strongly, clouding any remaining rationality. You still talk? Harding roared, his red face turning purple with rage. You dare call me blackmail? You defy the police? You disregard the law? He turned to Riley, his eyes glaring. Riley put her in handcuffs for resisting an officer. Riley, who had been waiting for this, lunged at Elena. Elena instinctively backed away, but not fast enough. Riley grabbed her arm, twisting it roughly behind her back. Elena cried out in pain and surprise. She tried to pull away, but Riley was stronger and had the help of Harding, who held her by the shoulders. "Stand still. Resistance is an additional crime," Harding shouted. Clack! The cold metal click of handcuffs clamped down on Elena's wrists, cutting off any hope of a quick, civilized resolution. She was pushed back against the Lexus, the pain in her wrists and the humiliation choking her. That's when Harding and Riley began to gloat, not knowing that they had just dug a hole in the ground to bury their own careers and futures. They had no idea that the woman they had just insulted, assaulted, and handcuffed was not a pushover but a U.S. Army colonel, a high-ranking officer with power and connections far beyond their limited imaginations. So what now? No more cockiness? Harding stood with his hands on his hips, looking triumphantly at Elena, who was handcuffed and leaning against the car. He felt good about having taught this stubborn black woman a lesson. Riley was rummaging through Elena's purse, which he had just taken from the front seat of the Lexus, a completely illegal search. He dumped the contents onto the hood of the patrol car, a leather wallet, some cosmetics, a small notebook, house keys, and a sturdy-looking cell phone, a little different in design from a regular phone. Elena took a deep breath, fighting the anger and humiliation that surged through her chest. Her wrists ached from the tight grip of the handcuffs, but she knew that panicking or pleading was useless and even more dangerous. She needed to keep a cool head, act strategically. She had faced far more dangerous situations than this on the battlefield. "I would like to make a phone call," she said, trying to keep her voice calm and professional, despite the dire situation. "Calling again?" Harding sneered. "Who are you going to call? Your slum lawyer, or call your mum to post bail, or call your rich boyfriend for help?" Riley added, picking up Elena's phone and examining it. "It looks like a fancy phone, probably stolen too." "I need to make a call about my work," Elena insisted, ignoring the insults. "It's my legal right to be arrested." Harding looked at Riley and shrugged. It wouldn't hurt to give her a hopeless call. It might just turn out to be interesting or embarrassing. "Fine," he said condescendingly. "Go ahead, Riley. Give her the phone." Riley handed the phone to Elena, still with a mocking look on his face. "Hey, call, but make it quick. We don't have all night to wait for you." With her hands still cuffed behind her back, Elena had trouble holding the phone. Riley reluctantly held it to her ear. Elena took another breath, concentrating. She knew what she needed to do. She didn't need to dial. A few important contacts had been pre-programmed for voice dialing. Her voice rang out, not too loud but clear and authoritative in the quiet night, directed straight into the phone's microphone. "This is Colonel Elena Mitchell. Service number Alpha Sierra 4,879,012. As soon as the words Colonel Elena Mitchell were uttered, the smiles on Harding and Riley's faces suddenly disappeared. They looked at each other, then at Elena, with surprised and skeptical eyes. "Colonel? What did she say?" Harding muttered, but Elena didn't stop. She continued talking into the phone, her voice flat but each word like a hammer echoing in the sudden silence of the street. "I am making a call on an unsecured line, requesting immediate identification and connection to the National Combat Command Center at the Pentagon. Priority 1, situation Broken Arrow, incident response procedure involving a senior officer under threat." The silence was deafening. Harding and Riley froze in place. Pentagon? NMCC? Broken Arrow? The high-level military jargon struck them like thunder. Harding's face went from red to pale. Riley's jaw dropped, the flashlight clattering from his hand to the street. Elena continued, her voice unchanged, reporting the situation as concisely and precisely as if commanding an operation. Current location: approximate corner of Maple Avenue and 12th Street, Oak Creek. Status: unlawfully detained by 2 Oak Creek police officers, identified as Officer Dale Harding, badge number OC1127, and Officer Kevin Riley, badge number OC1539. Evidence of abuse of power, racial discrimination, and attempted extortion. Request immediate notification to Brigadier General Peterson, Office of the Chief of Staff of the Army, and coordination with the Army Criminal Investigation Department, CID, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to initiate personnel intervention and protection procedures. She paused, listening to the response on the other end of the line that only she could hear. Harding and Riley stood frozen, cold sweat pouring down the backs of their necks. They looked at Elena like she was a ghost. Colonel? Pentagon? FBI? CID Brigadier General? This was no joke. The black woman they had just insulted, assaulted, and attempted to blackmail was actually a high-ranking military officer. Impossible. But her demeanor, her tone, her technical terms, her unnerving calm left no room for doubt. No, it can't be, Harding stammered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. He took a step back, then two, his eyes filled with horror as he looked at Elena. Miss, sir, is there some mistake here? He quickly changed the way he addressed her, his tone pathetic and flattering. Riley was worse. He was shaking, his face as white as death. Please, Colonel, we're sorry, really sorry. He fumbled forward, trying to uncuff Elena. It's just a misunderstanding. We didn't know. Please forgive me, Colonel. Elena looked coldly at the two men who were cringing and begging before her. Just a few minutes ago they had been arrogant superiors, but now they were like frightened puppies. She said nothing, only shook her head slightly when Riley reached for the handcuffs. She knew the machine was set in motion. All evidence needed to be preserved. Squeak, squeak. Just then, Harding's shoulder-mounted radio crackled. The operator's urgent, almost panicked voice came over the speaker. Car 14, Mark Harding, Riley. Where are you? Report immediately. What the hell are you doing with Colonel Mitchell of the Army? Direct orders from the Chief of Police. Maintain the scene. No further action. Absolutely do not move the Colonel. Wait for instructions. Do you hear me? Harding shakily lifted the radio to his lips. Roger, center, he gasped. Riley fell to his knees, his face drained of color. The news had not only reached the Chief of Police but also the Pentagon. They had truly caused a huge stir. Elena Mitchell stood there, still handcuffed behind her back under the cold red and blue lights, but she was no longer the lone victim. She was the center of a storm that was about to engulf two corrupt cops and possibly the entire Oak Creek Police Department. The tables had turned. The power had truly spoken. Less than 10 minutes after that frantic radio call, the silence of Maple Avenue was broken by the screech of tires on asphalt. Two new patrol cars and an unmarked black sedan pulled up near the scene. Their lights were flashing, but there was no siren, a sign that the situation was being handled with caution and urgency. Stepping out of the black sedan was Oak Creek Police Chief Thomas Miller, a middle-aged man with gray hair, his face showing extreme tension and anxiety. He was followed by two other senior officers, their faces equally serious. Chief Miller practically jogged over to Colonel Elena Mitchell, completely ignoring his two subordinates, Harding and Riley, who were huddled next to the patrol car like criminals awaiting judgment. Colonel Mitchell, Chief Miller said, his voice trying to sound calm but not hiding his confusion and remorse. This is Chief Miller. I have just received a notification from Army headquarters and from the Pentagon. He swallowed. On behalf of the Oak Creek Police Department, the first would like to extend my deepest apologies to you for this unacceptable incident. Please forgive our officers for their misconduct. He turned to one of the two senior officers accompanying him. Lieutenant Davis, uncuff the colonel immediately. Be careful. The lieutenant hurried forward and used the key to unlock the handcuffs that were tightly around Elena's wrists. Red marks were visible on her skin. Elena rubbed her wrists, saying nothing, just looking at Chief Miller with a questioning gaze. Colonel, Miller continued, we pledge our full and complete cooperation with the military and federal investigative agencies to bring this matter to light. There will be no cover-up. He paused, then turned to Harding and Riley with an angry look. Officer Harding, Officer Riley, immediately surrender your weapons, badges, and identification cards. You are both suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of the investigation. Return immediately to the department, to conference room 3, and await orders. Do not leave. Harding and Riley, their faces ashen, did not dare say a word. They silently removed their guns, their badges, and their identification cards, and handed them to Lieutenant Davis, in shame and humiliation, before the woman they had just tortured. Then they slipped into another patrol car and were driven away from the scene. That night and in the days that followed, a massive joint investigation was launched at breakneck speed. The case was no longer under the jurisdiction of the Oak Creek Police Department. due to the serious nature of the case, the involvement of a high-ranking military officer, the apparent civil rights violation, and the potential for federal crimes extortion. The Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) officially took over the case. Senior Special Agent David Thompson from the FBI Regional Office was assigned to lead the investigation. In parallel, the Army Command also dispatched an elite team of investigators from the Army Criminal Investigation Department (CID) to Oak Creek to work closely with the FBI, ensure the rights and safety of Colonel Mitchell, and gather information from the military perspective. Colonel Elena Mitchell's testimony became the cornerstone of the investigation. She provided a detailed, coherent, and objective account of the entire incident, from the unjust traffic stop to the handcuffs and extortion. She described every racist and abusive word and gesture spoken by Harding and Riley. Her professionalism and extraordinary memory as a trained intelligence officer enabled her to reconstruct the events with astonishing accuracy. The most important piece of evidence was the body cam footage of Harding and Riley. While they may have deliberately not recorded the entire incident, especially the live blackmail conversation, what remained was enough to expose their true colors. The videos of the unreasonable traffic stop, the arrogant attitude, the derogatory questions and comments, and the moment Elena was violently handcuffed became irrefutable evidence. The FBI also seized Elena's phone and the recording of the call to the Pentagon. Although the line was unsecured, the command center always had a backup recording system as additional evidence. FBI and CID investigators interviewed Harding and Riley separately. Faced with overwhelming evidence and pressured by seasoned federal and military investigators, the two corrupt cops' cover quickly collapsed. Their accounts were filled with contradictions, and eventually, despite attempts to blame each other or circumstances, they were forced to admit to the unjust stop, the use of inappropriate language, and the handcuffing of Elena. They denied extortion, but circumstantial evidence and the colonel's testimony were enough to establish the charges. The FBI also did not neglect to investigate Harding and Riley's pasts. They found many complaints about Harding's abusive attitude and behavior throughout his career, but most were ignored or handled lightly. Riley, who was new to the job, also had a few complaints about discrimination. Investigators also found suspicious cash transactions in Harding's accounts, reinforcing suspicions that he was regularly earning extra money by harassing people. At the same time, the Oak Creek City Police Department, under intense pressure, officially decided to permanently fire both Harding and Riley. The trial took place several months later in the Central District Court. The case of an Army colonel abused and extorted by local police attracted intense public and media attention across the country. It touched on the thorny issues of racism, police abuse, and the complex relationship between different levels of government. Colonel Elena Mitchell, dressed in her full U.S. Army uniform with a row of medals glistening on her chest, stepped onto the witness stand. Her presence silenced the courtroom. She didn't need to say much. Her presence, her poise, her professionalism, and her steady gaze were a powerful indictment. She answered the prosecutor's questions clearly and concisely, without emotion or hostility. She simply stated the facts of what she had experienced that night. When the defense tried to find fault with her or discredit her, she responded with sharp logic and a calm demeanor that rendered those efforts futile. Federal prosecutors presented a compelling case with overwhelming evidence: Colonel Mitchell's testimony, body cam videos, call transcripts, testimony from experts in police procedures and civil rights law, financial investigations, and the defendant's personnel records. They emphasized the seriousness of the incident, the blatant betrayal of an oath to serve and protect, and the clear racial motive that motivated the crime. Harding and Riley's defense attorneys had little to offer. They could only try to plead for leniency, blaming work pressure, lack of training, or a momentary mistake by two men who made a contribution to the community. But those words rang hollow and weak in the face of the harsh reality. The federal jury, made up of citizens from many different walks of life, listened attentively to all sides. After deliberating, they returned to the courtroom with a swift and unanimous verdict. Both Dale Harding and Kevin Riley were guilty of all charges against them. The sentencing was a somber day for the two former police officers. Federal Judge Gloria Evans, an African-American woman with a reputation for being stern but fair, sat in the presiding chair. looking straight at the two defendants who stood in the dock, their heads bowed. Dale Harding, Kevin Riley, Judge Evans began, her voice echoing throughout the courtroom. You were entrusted with a sacred duty to uphold justice and serve your community, but you abused that power to satisfy your own vicious prejudices and personal greed. You singled out a victim based on the color of her skin, insulted her dignity, and attempted to extort her. She paused, her voice growing stern. Your victim was not just a private citizen. She was Colonel Elena Mitchell, a high-ranking officer in the United States Army, who devoted her life to serving and protecting this country, the very freedoms you have trampled upon. Your actions are an insult not only to the police but to all men and women who wear the uniform. The court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior. Racism and abuse of power are cancers that are eating away at the very fabric of our society and our legal system. This sentence must be a wake-up call, a clear message that justice will be done, regardless of who commits the crime. Therefore, the court sentences defendant Dale Harding to 7 years in federal prison, defendant Kevin Riley to 7 years in federal prison. The verdict was announced. Harding and Riley collapsed. Their families sobbed. But for justice, it was a victory. The two abusers had received their just punishment. Federal agents stepped in, handcuffed them again, and led them out of the courtroom to begin their sentences. The 7-year federal prison sentences for former officers Dale Harding and Kevin Riley each sent shockwaves not only to Oak Creek City, but across the country. It became a prime example of the federal legal system stepping in to crack down on abuses of power and civil rights violations at the local level, especially when racial discrimination and military personnel are involved. The Oak Creek Police Department was forced to confront a serious crisis of confidence under intense scrutiny from the U.S. Department of Justice and relentless public pressure. Chief Miller, who later resigned early, was forced to make sweeping and painful reforms. Hiring processes were tightened. Mandatory training on bias, cultural sensitivity, and community engagement was increased. The use of body cameras became mandatory and more closely monitored, with stiff penalties for intentionally turning them off or hiding data. An independent civilian oversight board with substantive powers was also established to receive and investigate complaints of police misconduct. While the road ahead is long, the case of Colonel Mitchell has forced the Oak Creek Police Department to begin its journey of change. As for Colonel Elena Mitchell, after completing her role in the investigation and trial with admirable professionalism and composure, she quietly returned to her daily life. She finished her leave with her elderly mother in Oak Creek, who was extremely worried but also very proud of her daughter. She declined all requests for interviews from major media outlets, only issuing a brief statement through the Army Public Information Office. In that statement, she expressed her confidence in the U.S. justice system, thanking the Pentagon, FBI, CE, and the Point U.S. Attorney's Office for their timely and effective support. She emphasized that this case does not represent the entire police force, many of whom continue to serve their communities every day. Finally, she expressed her hope that her story will contribute to promoting positive change and encourage people to stand up against injustice. The tragic incident at Oak Creek did not slow the resilient officer down. She returned to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to resume her command of a major intelligence unit. Her reputation and respect within the military grew. She was known not only as a talented leader and a shrewd strategist, but also as a symbol of courage, integrity, and the ability to maintain dignity even in the worst of circumstances. Perhaps that experience planted a seed in her. She later became actively involved in mentoring programs for young officers, especially women and people of color, to help them overcome the challenges and prejudices of the military environment. She also attended seminars on improving civil-military relations and promoting diversity and inclusion in the armed forces. She did not let her pain turn into bitterness, but turned it into motivation to make a difference. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Because tomorrow, we will have another meaningful story for you.